Hello, welcome to the Agency Download podcast, where we have real conversations about the advertising marketing industry. I'm your host, James Williams, and today I'm joined by Dave Mastovich, founder and CEO of Mass Solutions and #1 best-selling author of No Bullshit Marketing. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'd really love to just start with your story. I know we kind of talked briefly about it before, but how did you get to this point of writing that book
Mhm.
and starting and running Mass Solutions?
Sure. It goes way back. I had a lot of creative pursuits at a young age. So I did my own kind of businesses as a kid. So I got the selling aspect of selling things, but I also did a lot of creative work. So I ended up being on radio, on TV, and newsprint back when I was a kid. That led to me actually after college, right as I graduated, two of the stations, I worked at multiple stations, and two of them had gone bankrupt and were ranked 13th and 14th, and really nobody would take the job. So I took the head job there to run the place, and the arrogance of ignorance kicked in because I just didn't know what I didn't know and did a lot of stuff on instinct or what I'd been taught. And that enabled me to get to build relationships. And you and I were talking pre-show how building relationships is key to sales. And so I had to do a lot of sales, but also sales management, leadership. But I built the on-air team. I did on-air work myself. I wrote bits for the morning show, did voices, did sports. And all of that just continued to snowball. And I ended up getting involved in turnarounds in a lot of different industries, one of which was healthcare. And so I've been a part of three industries that transformed, where I think I played a role a little bit in that transformation, or at least was enjoyed it. So one is media. I was in at the time when it was still owned by a lot of single entities, or you owned 5 stations, 10 stations, 20 stations, until you saw Clear Channel and everything blow up. And so I got to see the transformation of that. Then I was in healthcare and got to see healthcare transform from kind of a niche industry where each community had their own big hospital, its own fiefdom. And I saw that change. And then I applied those same techniques to education, which was about 10 years behind healthcare. And then I've had my own company for a while. Now I'm seeing the change of a fourth industry being transformed because the industry you and I are in is being transformed by AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you basically identified, you saw it happening in one industry, and then you identified similar problems or probably
Yes.
solutions out of that, and then applied
Yes.
it to a new industry. And now you're kind of developing that same process with, marketing, advertising industry and all
Yes.
that. What do you think what was the perspective that you had, or how do you think you developed that skill set of seeing the holes and the gaps in different markets, and then how to apply similar strategies, even though maybe they're not directly, it's not the same industry, but how do you apply the
Yes.
same strategies and executions to new industries?
I believe we all have a couple of unique abilities. We just have to define what those are. And I think one of mine is the ability to pattern match and see trends and then act on them. I think that's one of my unique abilities. I think the other is being able to crystallize messages and convey them quickly. And so it goes back even to college when there's this old thing, but even old when I was in college, Marketing Myopia was this landmark article about how railroad industries didn't understand they were in the transportation industry. And that stuck with me. And I think when you look at all those industries I was a part of and saw them transform, it really was that there was an old way of doing things that wasn't as customer focused, and technology and other things shifted to enable you to deliver that service differently and be more customer focused in a different way. When the media changed, it was even pre-internet when the media started to change from the mom and pops to the bigger conglomerates. And there's good and bad to that, but for the most part, it was good because it expanded our access to media. And then, of course, the internet 1000x'd that. And then healthcare was the same thing. They weren't really customer focused. Hospitals were like places you almost went to die. You didn't even care how you got around to visit people. And then you turn it into what we did at UPMC when we were building this large multi-billion-dollar system, was we wanted it to be a positive experience in as much a way as possible. We wanted it to have a good dining experience for the visitors. We wanted you to be able to have a wayfinding system. I remember when I first talked about wayfinding systems as we were gobbling up hospitals. I was like, each hospital needs its own wayfinding system. So the customer experience from the visitor parking in the garage until they got to the place, and then when they stepped out to grab a bite to eat at your cafeteria, all of that was part of the customer experience. And then in education, it was really interesting because education actually wasn't focusing enough on the students. And I maybe went too far. The student experience now is so fantastic. But now you look at our industry. And what is our industry? We've always had a challenge that you look at the show Mad Men, and we're depicted as this industry that goes out and has fun and just comes up with ideas. And then you saw the internet take it the other way. So you have people that are on the quant side that go too far on the quant side. And prior to that, you had people that went too far on the creative side. And so there's all this like misperceptions of our industry, and AI comes in, and now people think, whoa, I can write that myself. I can do a video clip myself. I can do my social media post myself. And we'll probably get into this in the talk, but that leads to a lot of garbage content. And what's out there now is mostly garbage content. If you look at LinkedIn, you can look at a post and the next post and the next post from 7 different people, and it sounds like the same person because it's all written in passive voice, which is ChatGPT, and it's got the same space shuttle little emoji in it when it's talking about growth, and it's garbage. So this is what happens when you pattern match and you understand trends and you say, this is going to change. AI is phenomenal. It's not going away, but it's going to change. We're going to actually start looking at marketing strategy as even more significant because people are going to realize that you can get the low end garbage pretty easily, but to get the real impactful stuff, you're going to need strategy.
Yeah,
So that's a long winded
absolutely.
answer.
No, no, I think it's a great answer and really nails down to the point, which is the difference between strategy and just task automation. And there's a big difference there. And I think I just saw a recent study that said that or showed that people have basic AI blindness. So like I come from the paid media buying space, and a big topic always is in with display ads across the open internet is there's banner blindness, right? People see and
Yeah.
recognize it's an ad right away and they just ignore it and tune it out. And I think the same thing is going to happen in the content space
Yes.
where people are going to recognize this is just low quality AI copy and paste and they're going to tune it out and ignore it. And it's missing the underlying brand voice and the foundation and principles that make marketing and branding really work. So I'd love to really ask you that is, I know we'll get into more of the differences between strategy and tactics. I think you have great insight into that from our last conversation. But what do you see as kind of the underlying principles? We always have this like technology landscape evolution that's always adapting in terms of media and devices
Hmm.
and technology. But I think there's underlying principles of branding, marketing that will work always, regardless of the technology landscape. What do you think those kind of principles are? What principles have you seen that have continued to work throughout your career,
Yeah.
regardless of the technological landscape?
It comes down to 2 parts, and one part is defining the customer, and the second part is understanding the customer. And defining the customer is really drilling down into that segment so it means something. It's got to be meaningful and substantial. So people will often say things like, "I want to reach women." And you go like, "I want to reach men," or whatever. Okay, that's one variable, but you really need 4 or 5 variables, and each of the variables have to be substantial enough. Like sometimes people say, "I want to reach this, this, and this," and we'll go, "Yeah, but that's such a tiny fractional sliver. You don't have enough people there to do what you're doing and how you're selling. If you have a product that sells at a very high ticket, maybe you can go to 7,000 people and that's your entire target. And there's 20 of you competing for that. But each of those pieces of the segment, each of the variables or characteristics has to be substantial. It has to be measurable and has to be reachable. So when you define the target, it has to be done with rigor and it has to be done with honesty. And what we're really responsible for is driving growth. And that's what I believe I'm strong at and my team is. And so we come in and we look at 3 years of sales data. We come in and we say, not only will we sign an NDA, we have an NDA we want you to sign because we've got IP too. So we come in and we look at your 3 years of sales data and we begin and we follow the Pareto principle, 80-20 principle, which is that 80% of our outputs come from 20% of our inputs. So when you look at your closet and mine, 20% of the clothes in that closet are what we wear 80% of the time. If you go and look in your kitchen cabinetry and look at the food that's there, 20% of the food that's there amounts to 80% of our meals roughly. So when you do that same type of Pareto principle, there's 80/20 thinking and 80/20 analysis. 80/20 analysis is getting that 3-year sales data and actually coming back and saying, here's your 80/20 today, 20/80 today, both of them. They're slightly different. And then here's what it could be. And then that's 80/20 thinking. So 80/20 analysis is actually digging into the analysis. But having 80/20 thinking is how you ought to think about your life when you're making decisions. So that's the first part. Define target audience. The second is understand them. And some of what I said will help you understand them. But then you have to go out and do some level of voice of the customer. And it doesn't have to be $100,000, $200,000 research project. It can be something you do in a smaller level qualitatively by talking, especially in B2B. In B2B, I can have my team go out and we can talk to 15, 20 clients, talk to 3 to 5 referral sources, talk to the leadership team and then do an all employee survey. And we'll come back to you with amazing insights to help you understand your customer. When you do those two things, defining the customer and understanding the customer, the rest is execution because that stuff will also build your story for you. Let that behavioral insights drive the creative. Let the data drive the creative. So the science is actually driving the art. The math is driving the art. Because once you do those two things, define and understand the customer, then it's a matter of, do we use your techniques with your paid media and stuff? Do we do some PR over here to get some stories out? Do we do some social over here? That's all after the fact, and then it makes more sense. The problem is what I just described is barely done by even the biggest companies. And I know that because I was ahead of the marketing and growth of a multi-billion-dollar company. And I've gone all the way down now to help a company that's only doing 2, 3, 5 million in annual revenue. And the whole spectrum from startup to big colossal company doesn't do what I just said very often. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, it seems like they just scratch the surface on that piece. Is that it's always very broad stroke
Yes.
understanding of a generalized population. We want to target 25, 54 men that work in the trades. Very, very broad stroke.
And that
And then,
group is really, this is what I love the example you give, because that group is really similar. Like, I have a son who's 26. Okay. And I know a guy that coached with me that's 54, and those two, they do a lot of things together, right? They have a lot of the same interests. They don't. I mean, when you go 25 to 54,
yeah,
that's crazy that we still do that. That was
right.
crazy 30
Yeah.
years ago to say 25 to 54. Like, you have to be able to slice that differently. So but you're right. It's done at a
Yeah.
cursory level.
Yeah, and then jumping to tactics. What you're really
Yes.
talking about is like creating that underlying strategy is focusing on who your audience is and what their
Yes.
real beliefs, habits, interests, behaviors
Yes.
are. And that's
Yes.
where I think AI is really going to benefit a lot of advertisers and marketers
It
is
is.
that nobody has unlimited budget. Everybody has a fixed budget and needs to do more with less. And
Yes.
what I hope the transition happens is that you still need strategic marketers, but maybe AI will allow, if you do the strategic foundation building like you're talking about, maybe that'll allow you to do 10 times more, create 10
It
times
will.
more content that speaks specifically to the 25, 30-year-old that lives in California differently than you're going to talk to the 45 to 50-year-old that lives in Indiana.
Yes.
And creating different
Yeah.
segmentation and content and specifics for each one of those audiences that's where I hope that it can go, is that it can scale up the tactical execution.
I think it can. Now, my company is a marketing consultancy that does ad agency work. What I mean by that is we're a marketing consultancy that does that, understanding the customer and defining the customer. And we do the big idea, and we do storytelling pillars, and we do some execution similar to ad agencies. So I tell you that because I talk to a lot of ad agency CEOs, management consulting CEOs, marketing consultant CEOs, and owners. And I hear that it's an interesting time. It's a challenging time. There are some people that are going through some growth, but a lot of people are seeing flat or declining numbers. And I say that's true. We're going through a time that's a little bit different from a top line sales standpoint. But I will say that there aren't many great things about aging, because being young is awesome. It's not realized how great it is. But the one thing about being seasoned is that you've lived through things. And when you live through things, I can tell you there was a time when email was spectacular for marketing because it hadn't become mucked up with garbage yet. So there's about a year to 2 year window 20 some years ago when email was amazing. And now it's making a little bit of comeback, I would say. So with each medium, it's been what we're seeing with AI right now with the garbage content of AI. Another example I use a lot is when SurveyMonkey came out, we do insights, we do research, and then we're not a full research company. We do a lot of our own research, and then we have huge clients. We bring in others that we provide the direction to and some of the insights ourselves. But when you do insights, SurveyMonkey came out, people were nervous. And what ended up happening with SurveyMonkey? A bunch of people thought they could go out and do their own surveys and gather their own insights. And they did 38 questions on a survey and did nothing with the results because they got garbage insights. And then what they do? Oh, I can't do my own surveys. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with AI because AI is completely different. AI is amazing. It's going to change, continue to change everything. But what I am saying is going to happen to AI is there's going to be a point where we as the consumers of it go, okay, it's really great for X, Y, and Z. It sucks for A, Q, and R, and I need somebody special to do A, Q, and R. I believe your earlier point is we in our space, the marketers who are strategic, and there aren't a ton of them. Everyone thinks they are, but there
Right.
aren't a ton of them. They usually get focused on, I do one piece of marketing and I'm great. I'm strategic about that. Okay. We can be semantic here. I'm just saying, I don't know that that's saying you're strategic. If I'm strategic with Canva, I don't think that's being strategic with let's drive growth. Let's change EBITDA by doing X, Y, and Z through these 9 steps.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I
That's
think
the
there's a
difference between
small group of,
strategy and
yeah,
tactics.
yes. And there's a
Exactly.
small group of people that are going to benefit when we get through the first wave of nonsense.
Yep.
Right now, everyone's so excited that they don't have to write an email anymore. They can have ChatGPT write their email and their LinkedIn post. But over the next 6 months to a year, I think you're going to see that change.
Yeah, there's a speed and efficiency that everybody's gravitating really to. Is that I think it saves so many people so much time
Yes.
that they're going to it and probably leaning on it too much. Whereas you don't want it to think for you. You want it to automate and help you do more with less. But I think exactly what you're talking about. And like we live in that world because I run and manage a paid media buying agency. We are essentially a tool in the toolbox. We are not a contractor that can plan out or an architect that can plan out a whole house. Right. We are a single tool that executes one thing really well. And I think there's an immense amount of value of having specialist agencies that do one thing really well. But the most important thing is that underlying strategy, which is I think
Yes.
what you're getting on and that
Yes.
your company specializes in
Yes.
is you're a specialist for strategy. And I think
Exactly.
more brand marketers need smart strategy. And then they know when I need to use SEO or when I need PR or when I need a paid ad management strategy or when I need different tactics or how I should use content or AI for my marketing campaigns or for my business. But I think that's the big challenge that a lot of brand marketers are in
It is.
is
It is.
not building that foundation first and then the tactics on later.
I'll tell you something that I've seen happen time and again. And we've had multiple companies work with us, and because of their leadership, it's their credit. But they grew 10x. Others grew 5x, 6x, many 3x, many 2x. And these ones that are growing at least 2x to 3x all the way to 10x, what they're doing is they're saying, I know that I can get support on one aspect of strategy, but the vast majority of us as humans, because we've all been guilty of it at some point, is we think we hear the word strategy and it triggers us. And we believe, well, I do strategy. If you know how many times I've heard people say that. So I don't like to even use the word strategy because they then get mad at me. And what I try to explain is I'm not claiming your whole strategy. I'm telling you your strategy around the customer experience and how to communicate them. I'm one of the best in the world at that, me personally. My team's very good, but I'm one of the best in the world. Now, I don't give a shit who wants to argue with me. I know. Now, that doesn't mean that you, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, aren't great at the strategy of this part. Oh, this person's great at the strategy on the financial side. This person's great at the strategy on hiring. I'm telling you from the customer experience and how to communicate with them to educate and motivate them. I'm one of the best in the world. So if you get that, you're going to grow 10x when you You do all the stuff you're good at, and we're over here telling you how to do this piece. You're going to grow. And I say this to people that are private equity companies. I say, what's preventing you from leveraging us when you're about to buy another company or buying a bolt-on add-on so we can help you there? What's preventing you from doing that? What's preventing an M&A attorney from calling us up and saying, hey, this deal's about to go through and they're going to need someone to drive sales growth? And the ones that get it are minuscule amount of percentage wise out of 100%. They're a minuscule percentage number, but the ones that get it just take off because there's so few people doing what you described.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes creates a huge differentiation, and it's all about differentiating you from your competitors. And so if you can create real differentiation, you're gonna be more attractive, and you're gonna be better positioned in order to communicate with your customers and pull people in. Something I'm almost concerned about with how this AI is working that I fear, I think may happen in our marketing advertising industry and kind of the business industry as well with AI development is that, and this is already happening right now in the trades, right? You always hear in the trades, there's a shortage of, I've talked to a lot of different companies across like the steel iron workers and HVAC and plumbers. There's a huge shortage of people in the trades, and there's no knowledge passed down, right? Because there's not new people coming into those industries to learn from the people who've been in it for 20, 30 years.
Yes.
And I'm concerned, I wonder, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is that going to happen in our industry? Because instead of our industry and advertisers and marketers and business people hiring the intern and the coordinator and having that knowledge passed down, because you can automate things and have AI do a lot of the manual assistant level work that you used to would hire an intern for or an assistant or a
Yes.
coordinator entry level position, and then that person would eventually acquire your knowledge and principles and values and have that knowledge passed down. We're going to be missing out on strategic thinkers that we still need in 10, 20 years. We're going to have a shortage of
Yes.
people who know how to execute that.
Well, I want to say, so I don't sound like the old guy complaining. I want to say, I think I'm optimistic of how amazing things can go and how great AI can be. So I really think the majority of it is going to actually be really good. There are some things that will be lost. And I think this probably happened with every transformation over time. So your point is well taken that whether it's a graphic designer not learning the skills from another graphic designer and we end up just having things designed 100% or 90% AI, or whether it's writing. I had a meeting today with a content producer on the team. I don't know what to call them anymore because you can't call someone a writer anymore. So it's a content producer. She was saying, she goes, what's really interesting is it's so hard to get anyone to read anything today. And she said, and so they're comparing this writing on ChatGPT. And we went on this long conversation where I brought up and I said, here's the thing that's missing. If you take and have ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever write something for you, and you didn't go out and talk to anybody to get an actual quote and hear from that person exactly when you're writing the bio about them or when you're writing this story, you are missing something huge. And that does take skill to be able to, you have to get experience with that because we were just talking about how when you're early in your career, you have some natural abilities. So you know how to ask questions. A lot of young people today that are so used to grabbing the camera and asking a question, go, no, no, no. And so they think they're good at that. They are, they have a natural skill, but taking it that next level and applying it to an actual piece that had flow that wasn't just on camera is something that will be missing. And so I think that when I talk to young people, I say, hey, hardly anyone's going to take this advice, but the one that does out of 100 is going to just kick ass. And this advice is really old and archaic. And it is read a book. What? Read a book. Oh my God. Why would I do that? That's weird. Well, if you actually read, your mind is impacted differently from actually reading. Now, I'm not crazy. I watch videos all day long too, because it's how we consume content. But I also get the most out of when I'm reading a lengthy article or I'm reading on the Kindle or I'm actually reading a book. That gets the most for your mind, but you take away things. And I see it in meetings all the time. I see it in meetings all the time. I will just be able to bring something to the table that I know was because of that. And that's what I'm going with when I said about the interviewing. If someone's doing a story and they just continually shoot video of clips of things, they miss the point of actually having a conversation when that person was just talking to you, not on camera, because no matter who we are, we're different on camera. Now, obviously, I'm not that different because my arms are flailing and I'm scratching my face and stuff because I don't care. I just get on and say whatever the hell I'm going to say. But most people kind of change.
For
So when
sure.
you get them in the room and you're just talking, whoa, they tell you stuff. So I say to people to read, do some writing a little bit. And those are the things that I think you're right. We could lose that in the design and the video piece. Like I have a video producer friend that we had to fly to Chicago to do some videos, and I was providing direction and messaging, and I watched him do his craft and I was like, man, people just don't get it. And unfortunately, this client was big enough that I could bring this high level person in and they were willing to pay for it. But the difference in what we produced together was so much better than the do it yourself, quick young person who's shot all their lives, but they just shoot and chop it together. So there's a place for that still. That's not
Yeah.
every day, and it's not most of your video. Most of your video shouldn't be that. Most of your video should absolutely be what it is. But there's a time and a place when someone with that craft to plan out the shot, it's remarkable when you see something like that. And I don't want to see that go away.
Do you think that was just the collaboration, working and feeding off of another human that has a different perspective and kind of you like your minds start merging together when you work with somebody
That
on
was a
something?
big piece of it. And the second big piece of it is we were able to actually plan. And I'm not claiming that people don't plan, that shoot quick. That's not what I mean. I'm not disparaging these talented people. I'm just saying that we have such a quick art form now that we just turn the camera on and do it because of reality TV from 25 years ago started it. And you now have that as 100% or 99% of the content when it should probably be 80%. There should still be some of this where you actually plan out a shoot and say, I'm going to interview this person. I'm going to ask these 3 or 4 questions. We're going to shoot the 2 cameras. We're going to do this, do that, and we're not going to just chop it up real quick. We're going to actually go into post and do some stuff with this. And it's more than 1% of production. Right now. I don't want to sound naive or wrong. I'm just saying that it's not as much as it could be. And I think that there's value in how he and I fed off of each other, and then there's value in having the prep work and the planning,
Yeah.
and there's value in shooting, like coming in and spending 2 hours prepping for that shoot. I mean, that's
Yeah, you can't undervalue prep and preparation. I wonder if it's almost just because we live in this hyper over content world where everybody's trying to compete with attention and
it is.
it's a race to whoever can get the next post out, the next piece
Yeah,
of content is people
it
are
is.
skipping the planning and the prep work because they think it's eating into too much time of creating. But the planning and the prep work could pay dividends for the production and the outcome of a piece of
Think
content.
I think it's excellent that all of us can produce content. I think that's way better than it was 30 years ago, 50 years ago, even 15 years ago when there were official people that produced content and if other people didn't. I think it's great that everybody can produce content. That's a huge positive that should continue and is awesome. I just think there's it's like anything when something's easy, there's garbage. As the famous Mike Tyson quote is, people can post something on social media because you can't punch them in the face. You
Yeah.
know, if you said that to someone's face, you get punched in the face. Well, when you can produce anything so easily and you can produce a deck in 5 minutes on Canva and you can produce a video and you can post it and get it out there, it's clear that there's going to be way more garbage than there ever was. So the clients need to understand this. And that's the biggest thing. The clients struggle to understand the noise that is created because of stuff being less expensive. So then they don't want to pay for strategy. They don't want to pay for my stuff. What are you talking about? Why would I pay you to come in here and tell me what ideas?
Yep.
And then they don't want to pay for someone actually taking the time to do that video to hit that defined target and understand that target and influence them. So that's part of the problem. And that's where what I like to just say is the ones that try and do it succeed. And I have tons of examples of clients that have grown exponentially because they did what we're talking about. They wanted to understand the customer. They first wanted to define the customer, understand the customer, and they were willing to build a story that was real and not just noise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, it's building off of that foundation. You have the foundation of those marketing principles you discussed, and then building all of your content or your tactics and plans off of that core foundation.
for sure.
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is you talk about the B2E marketing as well. Could you discuss that a bit and explain kind of what that means and what a lot of companies are missing out on if they're not doing that?
So I was part of building a system for a system. And what it was we were building one of the first integrated financial healthcare delivery systems in the world. And that was a system that had the financing arm, the insurance, along with the provider arm, the physicians, and also the system, the hospital arm, and all the different things like PT, skilled nursing, all of that under the same umbrella. And the belief was, and it did come true, is that it enabled more and better care and better access to care. Even though we still have all kinds of problems in healthcare and complaints about it, it is stronger today than it was 20 years ago. And so during that, I made a conscious effort and said, I believe our employees have to be de facto members of our storytelling and our growth team. And so we built an entire system around communicating across and up and down and cultural building what that culture would be, and then telling that cultural story. So I would go out and try to sell this. And when I had my own company and people were like, huh? So I put the IP together and then we just named it BT, business to employee, because we felt everybody knows not everybody, but most people know B2B and B2C. So we said, let's make this B2E. And so about 10, 12 years ago, we named that IP, even though the IP was already in place, we named it that, coined that term. And we started pounding that term out, and it has resonated much more. And what B2E is first looking at what is the culture? What is your current culture? And if you don't get intentional about culture and building a story around it, then it creates itself. And that's one of the things that most companies, the culture is just created organically. Other companies create it intentionally. So what B2E is about is helping you intentionally create and tell your culture story. And so it's about defining core values. But here's the key. Most people will throw out some core values. Our core values are adapt, innovate. Well, you and I would define adapt differently. So would a third person. So would a fourth person. So you have to then put core behaviors that are anecdotes or analogies that explain that core value. And so few people do that. And we have a whole system around how to do that quickly and to do it with the employees and with the leadership team. And so then that builds your mission, your values, your core behaviors, your purpose, and the stories around it. And then we have rituals in place to help you tell that internally and even externally when you're recruiting. And so that's what B2E is.
Yeah, because without the behavior change, the values are meaningless, right? If you
Exactly.
don't act on those values or your principles day to day and show them from the top down, because I think what we always talk about is it starts from the top, right? Meaning that the way the CEO, the owner, the leaders at the top, what they set the tone, the atmosphere, the culture, then that trickles down to everybody else, and then everybody else follows in line. But it comes down to behaviors and actions and choices in real time. And do you see that as a kind of you're laying out the foundation? I love that of these are the behaviors you need to do to align with these values.
Yes. And there's a couple of things that happen. The first is that, the majority of companies don't address it intentionally. So they might have a mission statement and they might have a list of core values, but they don't do anything intentional with it. That's the majority of them. Then there's other people that maybe are a little more intentional about it. Maybe they've done a little more thought into their core values and their mission statement and so forth, but they still haven't treated employees, current and potential employees, like target audiences that they are. And having a marketing campaign and a storytelling campaign and a growth campaign targeted at current employees and prospective employees. So those are the things that happen. I would say, I hate to be pessimistic, but at least 50, 60% give it lip service, and another 30% are a little more intentional about it, but still don't have a system in place. Then that small group, 5 to 10%, actually are intentional about what the mission, the values, and the behaviors are. And they're intentional about having rituals about it. And it's not just going to a football game, an NFL game, and taking the team and screaming and cheering. And it's not just having your company picnic and your holiday party. It's not putting posters on the walls. Those are all tactics, like we started the show. Those are all tactics. It's about the strategy behind being intentional about what is your culture and how are we going to tell it, where are we going to tell it, what all is going to be done, and having rituals around that. And that is done by 5% of companies, maybe.
Yeah. Amazing that so few do that. And I guess it's hard. It takes intentional planning and
Yes,
expertise to really know how to build that in. And then I would guess that that has a really big impact on recruiting and attracting talent to organizations, which is something I think is not as talked about as much from the marketing perspective. But I think the same principles of marketing to recruit apply to the same principles of marketing to sell your product or
it
your
does.
service, and that you essentially need to market both. You need to market your organization to recruit and bring in talent that can grow at the same rate as your sales and the service and products that you offer.
It's true. And we talk about six target markets, six right fit target markets with current and potential clients, current and potential employees, and current and potential referral sources or centers of influence. When you take them current and potential employees, the B2E programs do three things, and they all begin with R. And two of the R's everybody's heard. One is it helps with retention. When people understand the why, when the communication improves, people understand why they're there. They find out what makes them tick, and it matches up with the culture, so they stay. With recruiting, it helps you to weed out people. If you're telling your cultural story and someone is indifferent to that, then they're going to look at you, oh, well, I can get 10 cents more an hour somewhere else. Good. They don't fit that. But if someone gets the culture, it's not then about the exact salary and the benefits. That stuff's important, but if they got the culture, they'll make that move. So those are the two of the R's, which you've heard, recruiting and retention. But the third R is results. The productivity of the entire organization goes up. The customer experience improves because your current employees stayed longer and understood what they were doing, and the communication about how to do what you do was better. They understood the overall culture and the core values and the behaviors, and it helps you to recruit better people, and that drives results. So the three R's of B2E are recruiting, retention, and results. You'll hear a lot of people talk about recruiting and retention, but we're one of the few that bring in how it impacts results, and it's all through this B2E system that we've built.
Yeah. If you recruit and bring in better people, better talent, and you can retain them so you don't have constant information gap losses, especially as a small organization that I've worked in a lot of, retention is probably, I think, one of the biggest challenges a lot of smaller organizations deal with because there's always a lot of attractive offers that staff can go to, but retention then leads to the results. I love that. That makes so much sense because the better quality service or product you can give, that can help maintain and acquire more customers that way and retain customers. So you're not also turning and continue to burn out your clients. That's amazing. What do you think is the biggest kind of growth right now in terms of the leverage to growth for a lot of businesses that you're in? And maybe that's different per industry. I don't know if you have a specific industry example, but like what do you think the biggest leverage businesses can use right now to grow their business?
I think B2E is probably the biggest opportunity because so few people are doing it, and it helps with what you just described. It helps you to recruit better people and keep the current people, which makes your productivity go up, your costs go down, and your quality of the customer experience goes up. That's why we stress it so much. We think that it's a big part of our growth accelerator, which is our entire IP around driving growth. And growth is top line growth, bottom line growth, personal growth, professional growth. So that's one of the differences. There's sales growth, which is top line, but if you don't look at bottom line, that might not be the best thing. And then personal and professional growth ties to B2E. So we feel really strongly as part of the whole growth accelerator that one of the levers that is just neglected or not known about is this B2E driving recruiting, retention, and results through cultural storytelling.
Yeah. Unless you're a solopreneur and you have no employees, I think that covers every industry and every business, right? Is that everybody could recruit, retain, and deliver better results for their customers. And if you have a system to do that, then you can have outweighed results and impact.
The other lever would be systematically gathering insights, and that would be the systematically gathering of insights about your Pareto principle, your 80/20 thinking, and your 80/20 analysis of your sales data so you target better and you define better, but systematically gathering insights from all those target audiences about what they're thinking and feeling. It's really important what they're feeling about you and your competitors. So the systematically gathering insights and B2E are the two biggest levers.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking ahead 2, 3, 4, 5 years, advertising marketing industry, what do you think the big trends or big transitions businesses or advertiser marketers are going to have to deal with, over the next couple of years to continue to grow and deliver better results?
I do think that unfortunately, the average and below average, which every industry has peak performers, average performers, and below average performers. The average and below average performers on the content creation side will have trouble. So the top tier ones will remain top tier because AI isn't able to replicate that and won't be
Yeah.
able to replicate that, I don't think, in the next 3 to 5 years. But the average and below average people in that space are going to really suffer because if you're in a position like mine or these or other agency CEOs like yourself, we need to be thinking about being proactive and saying, what can we actually say we don't want to do anymore for you, Mr. and Mrs. Client? And just really do that. Say like, you can do this yourself and not try to push that and sell that because that's going to be a buffer point where they get frustrated and they're going to just then stop using others in the industry, you and others. So we all in the industry have to kind of get together and say, we should be proactive about this and say, here's some ways you can do that yourself. And we're not going to do that. Because as you mentioned, should free us up to do the stuff we really claim we want to do. Like, I know what I want to do. I don't want to be putzing around with a client arguing about the color of something on the website or whether a social post did this or that. I want to be talking about driving massive growth. I want to talk top line, bottom line, personal, professional growth. And so I would rather not be bogged down by the project management and account management of these low and mid-level projects. But a lot of places were built on those, and those are the ones I think are most vulnerable.
Yeah, those are the ones that things are getting automated away, or brands are going to realize they can do them in house. And so, why should they pay inflated fees
Yes.
for a service that they can do in house and they can automate through these different AI platforms? And that's something think I'm seeing in the ad management service and business is that ad platforms have gotten significantly better at automating everything when it comes to optimizing campaigns. So they have gotten what used to take a lot of manual labor and work to manage. They now are so much more efficient at delivering results. And so
Mhm.
I think either one of two things is going to happen. Either you have to go more performance focused, where we deliver performance and then we get a percentage of the performance outcome. So the business lines are aligned. And I think the percentage model is probably going to dwindle away. And that you should really, as agencies, you should be able to do either more for less or do significantly more, like so much better strategic thinking, like you're talking about, that it outweighs the cost and that what they get from you, they can't replicate internally because it's not something
Mhm.
an AI is doing. That
Agreed.
it's such higher level strategic thinking, it can't be replicated because you have IP around how to do something so specific. But I think for us, for example, I think we're going to see a lot of ad management services that are going to be pressured because the brands are going to threaten to bring things in house because the ad platforms were gotten better. So you
Mhm.
have to be able to do more for less because you should be able to, because the ad platforms are significantly better than what they were a couple years ago.
Yes.
So it'll be an interesting trend because I agree. I think that mid to low tier is going to get wiped out if they're just more of the doer and the task person rather than a strategic thinker.
It's going to be an interesting fleshing out of things, that's for sure. And like you talked about something at the beginning of the show and even before we went live, is that it's going to mean those relationships are that much more significant. So you will see some people survive because even if they're doing the low and mid level stuff, if they're just fantastic at the relationship with a couple big clients and can keep them. But for the long haul, for 5 years and 10 years, that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the sales, especially for higher level, higher budget sales, the trust and relationship is cornerstone to making that work. We've always
Yes.
believed that. We've always thought that referrals are always the best. And referrals are based on a relationship. It's based on trust. It's based on authenticity and knowing that whatever you say you can do, you actually
Yes.
deliver on. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice earlier in your career, now based on everything you know today and now, what do you think that one piece of advice would have been?
I've answered this similarly many times. I would tell myself to chill out, basically. Um, a lot of stuff that you worry about at early stages of your life, you look back and kind of go, what was I thinking? So, and then the other thing is, I just think being a dad, I tell my sons a lot about how we live, how we eat, and what we eat and drink. I mean, the life changing that I've had over the last 10 years, just from probably about 15 years of studying and trying to get better at abstaining from things that are in your face all the time. Like I used to eat pretty well, but then I'd binge and have 6 pieces of pizza after we won a championship as a coach. The team won the championship, but you're the coach, you're all happy. So, I think I would say to a young person or a younger me, I would say, be more conscious and intentional about what you eat and how it impacts your moods, impacts the fogginess after if you're out partying for drink 4 or 5 beers or whatever and eat some bad food. The next day you can claim coffee helped you, but you were still sluggish and just it's amazing. Like I cold plunge regularly and it's just amazing what that does. And things like I started doing yoga and stuff. I'm like, this is insane. If I'd have known to do this 20 years ago, well, this is crazy. This is so life changing to do these little things like, like the plunging and the yoga and you're shifting your weight workouts to something different, instead of the old curls and bench press and stuff. So I would just say to someone to be really cognizant of the fitness and how that impacts your mind, because it impacts your work productivity, impacts your relationships. And I've had a great life. I wouldn't go back and change a whole lot, but I just know that, like, man, it would have been cooler to have felt better.
Yeah. Yeah, like,
So,
what edge would you have had? And because I think the similar principles apply to your health is like the 1% improvement every day. If you've set up
yes,
foundational principles of like, I'm going to eat this way, exercise this way, and this is the foundation of how I'm going to build my life on, do you have like incremental improvements over time?
yes,
That's just scientific. It's like you're going to improve a little bit every single day. You just keep stacking wins. And then what outcome does that have? Because I think especially for business people and especially in the advertising marketing industry, you lose sight of those things because you're so absorbed in the work that you lose sight of like this also has a huge impact on the results and the outcome and how you
yeah.
lead, develop, and everything else.
The thing that there's a couple other things if you'll indulge me. So the first is I used to always this is just a joke. I used to always just joke when I was a young coach after playing sports. I ended up coaching at a very early age, and I used to say to people, hey, the best advice I can give you is something I never followed, stretch. Because like I would walk on the court of the football field and just go and, the stretching was like this half-ass pretending you're really stretching. But something like stretching really matters, I think. Overall, a lot of the stuff that we fixate on and we're not taking the time is we will lose something if we don't take the time to write. And writing is something that reading and writing are two things that people just don't do because they're boring compared to watching a video, doing something physical, or zapping and going from channel to channel. But the one thing I would tell people is take a stab at creating something yourself. And if you've never written something, write something. If you've never done something on camera very much, do something on camera. And I always tell people, start a blog just because no one needs to see it, but you'll get muscle memory and reps in creating. And what creativity does for us as humans is it just drives so much of our positive thinking about ourself and how we view things. So I would say to people, don't just use ChatGPT to write everything because A, it won't be as good, and B, you won't get that intrinsic satisfaction and the energy that you get from that and how it just triggers positive chemical output for you to do some level of creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. The skill set and the experience of taking and putting something on paper from your mind and crafting it and normalizing it and making it, it makes you think clear, I think. Makes you talk better, you communicate better, all of that. And that's why I like to really use the LLMs as really a research tool. It's like it helps you pull
Right.
content really fast and summarize it. Like that's the benefit. But don't let it
Yes.
write for you. Don't let it think for you
Correct.
is
Yeah.
that's where I think people need to merge those two is research assistant level work that used to would have take you hours to do. And then you still write and be the thinker behind the subject.
I joke when I'm on any of the AI, I would joke and say, "Oh, you're almost human because this was lazy what you just did and you didn't listen."
Very
Because
human like.
they take the lazy approach. They spit out this stuff that's lazy. Like, "Oh, you're
Yeah.
almost like us. You
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
listen to what I said to do, and you gave me a piece of shack."
They learn too much already from, from real people. Um, just after, I'm curious. The last question I have for you is just what keeps you motivated today? What keeps you enthused about the business, marketing, advertising, developing strategy for businesses? Like what keeps you motivated and excited about the business?
I'm blessed in that I'm easily excitable about whatever I get involved in. And I just like wake up every day and I start thinking about clients and what I can do for them. And then I think about content when I'm going to be presenting. Like I'm speaking to 100 CEOs in February. And today I was just starting a little bit of work on that. And I could picture the people reacting. And so I was like trying to figure out what would get them more value. So I've just always got excited about that. When I coach sports, I like always got excited about the practice plan and everything. So I get up and I'm just juiced to solve problems. I just love creatively solving problems. I also love gathering insights. My team laughs because I still want to do some of the insight interviews. I still say, no, I want to do like a half dozen of these insight interviews. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah. And I want to talk to, like, I like calling a client's client and I just say, tell me about Joe. What do you think about them? And it's like my wheels just start flowing. That pattern matching starts coming into play and I start coming up with ideas that just energizes me.
Yeah, I think the ideation is so exciting always. Is that when you start thinking about solutions for clients and you start things start firing of all the different ways you can solve a problem, that is like the most fun moment
It
of
is.
business, of marketing, of all of it. I always get great enjoyment out of that is like a new problem to solve. Because that's what I really think all entrepreneurs and all business owners and all businesses really are is they're just problem solvers. We
You're
figured
right.
out there's a problem that somebody needs solved and we're there to provide the solution, and then there's an exchange for that solution, and that's really all it fundamentally is.
And it's not easy, but we are blessed. We are blessed that we have that enthusiasm and that energy and that desire. You and I and other entrepreneurs were blessed. Now, what comes with that is we go through all kinds of things and we have our own issues and we have times it's imposter syndrome, at times it's workaholic, whatever. But the reality is we're blessed that we're constantly enthused about solving problems.
Yep, absolutely, all of it. Awesome. Could you tell people how they could find your book, where they could find your book, or how they could work with you or connect with you? Anything
Yeah.
you want to share?
The platform I use the most socially is LinkedIn, and I'm Dave Mastovich at LinkedIn. So reach out, connect, follow, whatever. I'll even give my email. I'm happy to send me an email with your name and address, and I'll sign a book, give you a gift for listening to the podcast. And it's Dave at masssolutions.biz. And that's massolutins.biz. If I do this when I'm on a podcast as a guest, I will, if you mention the podcast and that you heard it there and you send me an email, I'll send you a signed book, no charge. So that's how to reach me on LinkedIn and how to email me. We've got the podcast, No Bullshit Marketing, the No Bullshit Marketing Show. It's been around 11 years, back when Joe Rogan and Mark Maron and maybe 10,000 people had podcasts. And now my grandmother, she's no longer alive, but like anybody has a podcast. So there's that podcast has been around since before that
Wow,
was the case. And
nice.
then I have a YouTube show just called Real Chats with Dave, just starting that, just barely scratching the surface, but you can find that on YouTube. So all that stuff, masssolutions.biz. So
Awesome. We appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for joining us
thank
today.
you. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
All right.